It is often said that the state of modern dating is abysmal, and I think I had perhaps one of the worst experiences with that truism quite recently, and I'll get into a little bit why, and I'll get into the political implications, and also the social observations that I had from the unfortunately horrible date that I had with a leftist. But before I get into that, allow me to state something that I think needs to be stated, because many of you may be in a point in your life right now where you need to hear this, or you know someone who needs to hear this. So let me state this. Most people, and this is going to make some people mad, but that's okay. Actually, I'll say many people live lives of quiet mediocrity. Many people allow their situation, informed by their biases about themselves, to limit them from achieving their greatness. And in fact, this is perhaps the number one reason why people never really achieve their potential in life. Because their biases about themselves, informed by whatever negative thing is going on around them, has compelled them into a place of no growth, of sluggishness, and of complacency. And many of us are beset by this complacency, which has a very comfortable seeming message to us. Oh, if you just stay in the same spot, or if you just keep working this job, you keep doing this, you'll remain comfortable and life will be okay. But man does not grow and prosper in familiarity. He grows and prospers when he goes out and he ventures into the unknown. And I think that we really have to understand that as a backdrop for what I'm about to tell all of you happened. So I'll also give full disclosure. I happen to be a gay man, so that offends any of you, or if I don't want any of you to be caught off guard, so I will be referring to my date as him, because that's what it was. So, like everyone, I'm looking for love and a partner or anything like that, and like anyone else, I have been using the avenues the 21st century has afforded to, unfortunately, my generation, Generation Z, to find that, which I think those avenues, by the way, are very poor and unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the only way to really find love or romance is through these apps where you have this disjointed connection with somebody, where you are basically forced by the nature of the medium to reduce them to whatever their picture is or whatever their profile is. We are essentially making caricatures of people who we're supposed to find love with. I find that quite absurd. That's a different topic, different day. But I met this individual who I decided, after talking to him for about 5 or 6 days, and we had very long conversations that were pretty rich, I thought, I decided, okay, let's actually go out and see if this could lead to something more substantial. Because I'm not in this for a pen pal or someone to talk to. I want someone who I can share my soul with and share my sentiments with and build a life with, build a family with. So I met this individual at a park, and during the first half of this date, there was no problem. Well, at least the first 5 minutes. The date lasted 30 minutes. And here's what I say. For me, if a date is great, it'll last 2 or 3 hours. If a date is bad or going to go bad, it'll last about 30 minutes. Well, mine lasted about 30 minutes, so you can probably guess what the nature of the date was. But, I first asked this individual, and I'll get into the political implications for it, because that's why all of you are here. I asked this individual at first, well, where do you see yourself in life? And he didn't give me an answer that fit my standards, but I'm someone who is very forgiving and someone who wants to give other people a chance, right? Even if you say something that may not be what I want to hear, I don't believe that love or the pursuit of love is selfish. Love is what happens when you identify something beautiful in the person who you are going to love or you have an interest in. And even in their worst of times, you help pull that beauty out of them to make them the best they can be. So that's the ethic that guides me in my pursuit of romance, and guides me really, not just in that, but in my friendships and in all my relationships with those who I care about and those who I'm close to. So that's the kind of thinking I had when my standards are not always met. But eventually, the conversation got on the topic of my career. And as many of you know, I am doing my best to make YouTube my full-time career. Maybe by the time this video, you be shooting this video, maybe it'll already be my full-time career, but as of the posting of this video, it is not. And so, but I mentioned I do YouTube content creation, and I've done work in politics before. And this inevitably ended us up on the topic of politics And this is what, when things went bad. My date. He asked me, well, I don't really follow the news or current events, but what are some of your political hot takes? Now, let me first preface this. The existence of hot takes, that is, just opinions that you have that are controversial, that just exist and are like put in a very simplified way to make people mad, that is a sign of an unhealthy culture and an unhealthy political conversation. Conversation is something that arises from the human ability to speak. And man's ability to speak was originally used for he can make sense of reality. And by making sense of reality, he can flourish within reality. But speech has been degraded and used for so many anti-human purposes, whether it be for gossip, whether it be for tearing other people down with lies and defamation. So speech has deviated away from its original purpose and its original virtue, unfortunately, over the course of human history. So when I hear the term hot takes, I just see this de-evolution, this denigration, degradation of humanity that has made its way into our politics, has avoided deep thought, has avoided an interest in philosophy. I had people who I worked with in the past say, Christian, stop being so philosophical. One person, he's very prominent, I will not mention names, very prominent journalist on the right, writes a lot, has YouTube channel, everything. He once said, Christian, don't use certain words because you and I did not go to Harvard or Princeton. Now, I don't even speak ornately, see what I did there? But I talk how I talk. And this prominent journalist, again, he knows who he is, said this to me years ago when I was just getting started in this industry. And that advice really nagged at me because I was basically being told to deny myself, to build some false appearance of inauthenticity for some measure of career success. But if you ignore yourself, my friends, let me give you some fruit. If you ignore yourself, ignore your authenticity, ignore your inner desires to build an image of something that is not you, you will ultimately be miserable in the end because only your true self can ultimately satisfy your needs. An illusion satisfies nothing and ruins everything. But on to the topic. So he said, what are my hot takes? So I said, well, I'm a conservative, not really a hot take, but still. He said, okay, well, what does that mean? Because in my profile, I said I'm a classical liberal, and I kind of explain what that means. I'm like, well, that means that, that I believe that there are transcendent values, meaning there are ideas that go beyond my perspective, my individual opinion, and are actually a part of the nature of existence itself. And man should attune himself with these ideas that are indicative of objective reality. And then the conservative part comes in by wanting to maintain the norms and traditions that are explicitly centered around these ideas that help me understand the nature of reality and help me understand what it actually means to have a good life, what it actually means to be a good person, morality. And so all that kind of stuff, he was like, I don't know about all this kind of stuff. And he admitted, he actually said, all this news and politics stuff, I don't follow it. So I don't know about all this stuff. So he admitted ignorance, and yet, as you will see, went on to make some of the most declarative statements that only someone with a high degree of knowledge would be able to reasonably make, or only a fool and a clown who is stupid would be able to reasonably make. It had to be one of those two people to make the kind of statements he was making, but I'll continue on. So he said, okay, well, give me a position, because all those ideas, the ideas that I was talking about, the philosophy, he didn't want to hear about that. Oh, well, that's boring. Give me a position, an issue. Again, short sidebar. It is a sign of a diseased culture when talking about the first principle notions of what we believe is less fashionable than talking about what we believe with no foundation. If you only address issues, but you don't address foundations, you don't understand the issue. Little tidbit. So I gave him an example. I said, okay, how about the welfare state? I said, so welfare. I personally oppose welfare, government welfare, for a few reasons. Number one, I believe that welfare erodes trust between communities and erodes the ability of the community and private organizations to take care of their own. And I also believe that welfare encourages a sense of dependency on external forces for one's well-being, which erodes self-reliance and personal responsibility, which also inadvertently impacts someone's ability to make morally responsible decisions for themselves and also to grow as a human being. I think that welfare is cancerous on a moral level, on a social level, and on a political level, because also welfare is an act of robbery. It's basically programs funded out of goodwill by robbing someone to pay for them, robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's what welfare programs, really all government programs are. And so I made my points very succinctly, but this is what I believe. And he said, well, what about selfishness? But what about people being selfish? We need welfare. Who cares if people abuse the system? I said nothing about abusing the system. And I said everything about its impact on the human condition. He said, no. Who cares about abusing who cares about all of that? What if people abuse the system? And at this point, I'm trying to talk, and he's interrupting me several times. And I'm telling him, you're being snarky, and he's just laughing, like he's like giggling. And I'm like looking at myself, I'm like, whatever I saw in you, I'm not interested anymore. At this point, thinking back on it, the moment he began interrupting me and being snarky and just being rude and assertive, telling me when I tried to explain the foundations of my philosophy, then telling me that's not what I asked you, I should have dropped the date right there and walked the hell off. Because at that point, you're dealing with a soul that is greatly troubled, is antisocial, and also does not understand basic social conventions. You can't deal with people like that if they don't want to do the hard work and meet you halfway. It's very simple. So he began getting very rude with me. And then he began saying, okay, well, you say churches should be helping people instead of welfare, right? I'm like, well, they should be one of the organizations, yes. He said, well, okay. Well, how about the fact that churches hate gay people? I'm like, what? So I'm like taken aback. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I mean, all these Christians hate gay people, and I'm a bisexual man, so what if I needed help and they denied me? And so I looked at him, I'm like, you understand Christianity is a religion that has over 1 billion, even more people than that worldwide. Millions in America. And there are thousands of denominations in Christianity. And yes, there are particular denominations, many of them, that say that homosexual behavior is not approvable, it's not something we should approve. And that's their belief. And there are also denominations that say the exact opposite or hold no position. And regardless of where you put down, make your tent, make your home at, one truth is undeniable. You can't paint all Christians with a broad brush and say they all believe the same thing when it comes to specific positions and social issues that are secondary to the ethos of Christ and the mandate of Christ, right? A lot of these social issues that we have are secondary to the ethos of Christ and mandates of Christ. Even if the mandates of Christ and the mandates of the Bible have implications for these issues, they're secondary. What ultimately matters as a Christian is believing that Christ came to earth, that the Logos became human form, he was born of a virgin, came to earth as a miracle, resisted the temptations of the flesh, overcame them, and then died physically so that we could live eternally. That, if you want to be a Christian, you have to believe those things. Everything else, I think, is more debatable. So I tried to explain this nuance to him, and he said to me, well, okay, but only a minority of Christians are how you're saying it, a majority. And I'm like, how are you saying this? And then he said the most craziest thing, and this is the craziest part of the day where I knew this wouldn't work out. He told me, well, when Trump came to office, these evangelicals got even more emboldened and the homophobia got worse. So at this point, I'm like, what kind of human being are you? What hole did you crawl out of? And I'm like, I'm trying to be charitable because charity and goodwill is an essential binding principle for human social interaction. Without charity and goodwill, society is dull and boring and it's not fruitful and almost entirely. So I'm trying to embody the principles that I as a philosophy student study all the time. But I'm thinking to myself, what kind of human being are you? That you hop from attacking Christians with a broad brush on illogical grounds, then you mention Donald Trump. So I said, actually, Donald Trump is the most pro-LGBTQ president, most pro-gay president America has had in its history. This individual began to condescendingly laugh at me, snarkily, snicker, and just shake his head. So I began to explain to him, okay, if you don't believe me, let me present to you the empirical record. Number one, he nominated Richard Grenell, who is an openly gay man, to be an ambassador. That's number one. Number two, he went to the RNC stage and hoisted a Gays for Trump flag in front of everyone and did so proudly. Number three, he spoke up against the oppression of homosexuals in the Middle East. By the time I got to three, he was just like shaking his head and just like didn't want to hear it. And I looked at him, I said, you know what? You know this and I know this. This won't work out. And he's like, yeah, I agree. We just don't agree at all. And then he said to me, well, Christian, I just don't understand all of this stuff. I don't read the news or politics, but we don't agree at all. And that's really what got me, because he admitted his ignorance several times, and yet he acted as if his positions had foundations and bases in fact. And when he was presented with facts, he ran away as opposed to running towards the challenges to his ideas. So here's what really bugs me about this, is that my date is a microcosm for how contemporary Western and American, particularly society, is today when it relates to politics and social issues. The question is, how can someone have so much strong political convictions without actually knowing something? And I think the answer is very simple. And here's the tidbit I want to give all of you before I go. The establishment media and the influencer class on both sides talk about politics in an ignorant way or in a tribalistic way that is meant to arouse your passion, that is meant to arouse your emotion, and not meant to make you think. And in that sense, my friends, people, as I mentioned before, who are living lives of quiet mediocrity are confirmed in their ignorance by external forces that feed them things that are more appropriate for animals that are unthinking as opposed to rational human beings who are thinking, which raises a generation of convinced, sanctimonious idiots who believe they know everything, but in all reality, they know nothing. This is a lot of academia. I'm trying to be charitable, but a lot of professors are just like this. They are in these environments of quiet mediocrity. They have biases about themselves and the world, and as opposed to searching through those biases and trying to ask the question, is what I believe about myself or the world or a particular issue true, they are simply in this echo chamber where their ideas are confirmed by whatever force does it. Which is why academia is as bad as it is right now. It's a political circus where research and orthodoxy are prided over heterodoxy in the pursuit of truth. And it's quite unfortunate. And so this has impacted American political discourse so negatively. Imagine this. Imagine you have a river. But all rivers sometimes split from the main course that are just going down towards the ocean. Because rivers go from the headwaters and they go down to an ocean and they go out to the sea. And this split is called an oxbow lake because the split is basically filled in by land. And so no water can go in or out once that land is created. Now imagine someone is born in an oxbow lake. They don't know and they never seen the main course of the river. Or they can see the main course of the river a little bit, but it's foreign to them. Because human beings prefer familiarity over the unknown, which is why we built fire. And interestingly enough, fire was able to ward off the unknown and then also allow us to use the unknown to birth civilization. So fire was meant to do one thing, but the dynamic nature of creation is such that sometimes when we put something into motion, it produces an entirely unintended result. Think on that for a second. Meditate on that for a second. And so you're in this lake and you think that everything that's in this contained area is what the truth is. Everything that's within this contained area is what reality is. And anything that goes beyond that, even if you can see that it's true, no, it's no good. Now, oxbow lakes degrade and become swamps because there's no water coming in or out. There's no way to feed the life within them. The plants and the water, it dies. It all dies and becomes swamps. But you can even convince a swamp creature that their environment is the best environment for them to be in. Look at Washington, D.C. My friends, we need a revolution of the mind. My date was just a microcosm of what's going on in American politics, where we have so many people who know little, who refuse to read, who refuse to challenge themselves on both the left and the right, but the left is especially good at this, and who instead will sacrifice themselves and their integrity to the altar of ignorance rather than pursuing the truth. We need a revolution of the mind that places philosophy, not just, oh, I'm being so profound, but no, what is justice? What is truth? What is good government? What is government? What is the purpose of society? What is the purpose of human interaction? What is virtue? We need philosophy put in the forefront of our society. We need first principles. Why do you believe what you believe? What are the subterranean foundations of your belief? We need those to become commonplace in political reasoning. And we need reason to be upheld, not merely as this passive thing going on in the background that keeps us running, but as a value. Reason needs to be upheld as a value, because if reason is upheld as a value, all values will be able to be justified by reason, which fortifies them from manipulation and attacks from bad actors, and also fortifies your own understanding of reality and makes you a better human being for it. We need a revolution of the mind in this country, and I intend and hope to lead it if you all will let me, by liking, sharing, subscribing to this channel, commenting on this video, donating to me on Patreon, PayPal, christianwatson.com. If you all will let me, I want to lead that, and I hope that many of you will be willing to step up to the plate and lead it as well. I love you guys so much. If you love me, like, share, comment, subscribe. Tell your friends about this video. Donate to me if you want to. I have Patreon, PayPal, locals, everything. Be a part of the revolution of the mind. I love you guys so much. And please, 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 you better stay pensive. Bye, everybody.